Talked about Grogu, Baby Yoda, like in my opinion, one of the biggest kept secrets in all of cinema.
Yeah.
What was that like keeping that a secret from, your family, friends?
Steven Spielberg was like, after the first rehearsal, was like, hey man, I need you, that was an R-rated screen. I need you to give me a PG-rated screen.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Vader's Order podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Omid Abtahi, and you may know him in a few roles. Fear the Walking Dead, The Hunger Games, and of course what we all know him as, Dr. Pershing in The Mandalorian. How are you today, Omid?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I mean,
Yeah.
we met last month, but we're here now.
Yeah. Can I correct you on my pronunciation
Go
of my
ahead.
name?
Yeah.
Is that so just it helps people out there? It's Omid.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's a long E. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
All
very
right.
common. You're phonetically correct, but I like to correct the people I like.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we're here with Omid Abtahi.
There you go. Yeah.
So I want to take it just a little step backwards here. Where did Star Wars begin for you? Was this something that you grew up with? Was it part of your childhood, or did you get into it, later on in life with your acting career?
Yeah, I mean, I would say most definitely later on in life.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was the type that could hardly sit through a movie. I wanted to play outside, play sports, and I remember my first exposure with Star Wars was certainly not my parents. They didn't even know what that was. But it was during like daycare. I would come in, wash my hands, and then they would play Star Wars, and I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And I would see the hologram scene with Princess Leia, and I was like, "Whoa, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen!" Like,
Yeah.
but then I would run out and play soccer. But yeah, so I didn't know Star Wars too well until I got the offer to join the Mandalorian several years ago. And it was once I got the offer, I sat and I basically binged through the entire catalog of all the movies and familiarized myself that way. But I gotta say, I even upped it another level in my knowledge of the universe with just having a son who is madly in love with Star Wars.
Yeah.
And my bedtime stories for him needed to be detail orientated, and so I had to really learn about the world that way. So
yeah. Well,
it's more because of him than anything.
I mean, you got to be on set with him.
I did, yeah.
What was that like for you? I mean, that must have been honestly magical. I mean,
yeah, it was one of the best days of my life. I mean, like, I don't know if it's going to be one of the best of his life, but for me to have my son be able to come to set and not just watch me act, but to actually be in the scene and understand what his dad does, for a living, it was just really cool to be able to share that with him. And at the end of the day, he got VIP treatment. He got to see baby Grogu come to life. He got to shake hands with with Grogu. He got to see all the different costumes and the sets and the behind the sets. But at the end of the day, when I asked him, I was like, so Miles is the name. I was like, what was your favorite part? He's like, Daddy, the chocolate croissants were amazing. And I'm like, of course, it's always the food.
I mean, he got a VIP treatment, you can't.
He did. Well, those chocolate croissants are pretty amazing. So I can't fault him. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Does he come up to you now? Cause I mean, he saw you wear the costume and everything. I mean, his dad's in Star Wars. Does he ever come up to you now, even a year later, and bring it up ever?
We have one of those, like those, the Star Wars encyclopedia books.
Oh,
and he goes, Daddy, that's you. Like every once in a while, I think in the early days, he assumed that everybody's dad was in Star Wars. So I think as he gets older, he's appreciating that that's not the case. Yeah.
Well, I love the tweet you put out because literally, I mean, what you wrote, it's like, he's like, Dad, like Coruscant is real. And that like, it's magical. Like this franchise, it's like, it's like what you said. It's like this franchise, it doesn't matter what the age, like they're introduced it to you at, like, it's magical and it gives like a beautiful feel.
Oh yeah, no, it made me, so teary-eyed. It was such a wonderful moment. And it was all with the lights off, so like I couldn't really see his face, So, but it was, I mean, always that's a forever memory for sure.
Yeah, of course. So, going back to what you were mentioning about, how you got, let's talk about how you got the role. Like, what was that process like? Did you have to audition to get Dr. Pershing? Like, what was that like?
So, it's actually no, I did not audition. It was It was a gift from the universe. It was I was in Toronto shooting a show called American Gods.
Yeah.
and it was a Friday night, 1 in the morning, and I was fast asleep. I go to bed like at 10 p.m. And so I get this call from my agent at 1 a.m. and I'm like, whoa, this is weird. This is like either really good news or really bad news.
Yeah.
And, and me being an insecure actor, as most of us are, I was like, oh shoot, I'm getting fired off American Gods. That was my first thought. And so I answered it completely like half asleep,
Yeah.
more than half asleep. And my agent's like, I'm like, hello? And he's like, blah, 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 blah. Untitled Jon Favreau project, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yo, I can't even understand what you're saying. Like, can you like say it one more time? He's like, blah, 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 blah. Untitled Jon Favreau project, blah, 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 blah. I just was I was not awake. And I was like Googling it with one eye open. And I looking at my phone, I'm like, wait, is it? I was like, is this untitled Star Wars show for like, the Disney streaming platform that hadn't come out yet? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, they want me to audition for it? He's like, no, they're offering it to you. Wow. And I was like, yo, I'm for sure I'm dreaming. This doesn't make sense. This is not real. I'm like, I've only been offered something like maybe under 5 times in my career. So why this would all of a sudden be one of them, I have no idea. So I was like, let's hang up, call me in the morning, just so I can make sure that this is actually real. And, and it turned out he called me in the morning and it was real. And one of the greatest gifts that I've ever received in my life. It's been, I'm without words when I explain how awesome it is to get to be part of the Star Wars universe.
I mean, that's incredibly rare for an actor. And like, that's just an honor.
It is. Yeah.
What was the process like after that? Now, after you got the call, you're in basically. What did you have to do after that? Did you have to go, drive over to the Lucasfilm headquarters or fly over?
Yeah. I mean, the best I remember it, like I never was given a script. It was like, do you want to do it or don't you? I'm like, I don't care. Like, absolutely. I want to do it. And so I had to, well, actually, you know what's funny? On the episode of American Gods that we were filming at that time, Deborah Chow was the director.
Oh, no kidding.
And she was going to direct the second episode of Mandalorian season 1.
Right.
And so I was like, yo, hey, Deborah, the next day I was like, hey, Deborah, like, did you put in a call for me or something? She was like, what are you talking about? No. I was like, I just got offered a part on the Mandalorian. And she's like, no way. And so it's just a complete freak coincidence, right?
Oh, that's so cool.
Unless she really did put in a word for me. I don't know. But to answer your question, yeah, I went in to my costume fitting like a month later after I got back to LA.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay, so let's fit you. And I saw like the prototype, like drawing of my character, can you see here? And they had my face on a drawing.
Right.
And I was in an Imperial outfit with some kind of goggles on. And they're like, are you excited? I'm like, I don't know what I'm playing. I don't know who I'm playing. They're like, oh, you're going to love it. I'm like, well, can you tell me? They're like, no, we can't tell you. So I had no idea what I was doing until much later in the process, closer to filming, that they actually sent me just my sides, just my lines. I had no idea what the show was about. So I came in one day, I saw Deborah, I met John. They gave me a tour of like the volume and the LED, and they're like, do you want to meet your co-star? I was like, sure. Expecting a human being, and they pull out this violin looking case and bust out, Baby Yoda at that time.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is your co-star. And I'm like, how cool is all this? So yeah, like I be honest with you, like I didn't know a whole lot about it going into the first season.
Yeah.
And coming out of the first season, I still didn't know a whole lot about it. Like I remember being on the red carpet at the premiere. They're like, so what can we expect from the season? I was like, I have no idea. Like I literally was given just my lines, But yeah, so that's a big chunk of the experience of being on a show like that, is having no clue what goes on beyond your immediate, like.
I mean, what they did with the promotions for the Mandalorian season 1 was so top secret, because obviously, like, we know that like all the reveals that we got, was in none of the trailers, and it was like the biggest secret ever. But so you talk about, your costuming, and like, what was that like that first day you're on set, like the very first day, you're putting on the Imperial costume. By then, you probably watched a little bit of Star Wars, or you're more aware of it then.
Sure, yeah.
And you have the the makeup artist, the hairstylist. Like, did it hit you at all? Like, wow, like I'm actually in Star Wars.
That's a really good question. It didn't hit me
Right.
like that, like the way you're saying, until between one of the takes in the bunker scene with Werner Herzog. They were
Yeah.
changing the camera position, and so the stormtroopers took their helmets off
Mm-hmm.
and they sat down and they were starting to talk about like their daughter's like birthday party and this and that. And I was like, well, they're like, oh, Jim, are you going to invite your so-and-so classmates? They're like, yeah, we got to. And I was like, oh, and they're sitting in their stormtrooper outfits. And I'm like, oh crap. This is it. I'm in
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars, I made it. So it wasn't until that moment, the specialness of just the entire experience like really hit me hard.
Of course. And of course with your son as well. I mean, I'm sure that changed your relationship with Star Wars as well, I'm assuming, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It only deepened it, strengthened it. And it's been a joy. The whole experience has been amazing. Yeah.
Of course. Now, speaking of Werner Herzog, I heard a wild rumor that there was something about like a tennis ball or something like that. What was who's the tennis ball? What was that like?
So basically, in the early days, they had the animatronic.
Yeah.
And so we did one scene with the animatronic, here's Baby Yoda at the time before he was named Grogu, or here's the child, and oh wow, he looks very healthy. Let's go away and do some experiments on him. So we did one take with the animatronic. And then they're like, okay, now let's use a tennis ball instead. And that's your eye line. So in case we decide to use CGI as opposed to the animatronic. Right. And it took the magic out of that scene. I think as actors, you're like, there's a massive difference between that animatronic and a tennis ball.
Yeah.
And thankfully, and this is, I don't remember hearing this, but like Werner called them cowards for even having that option. And then you never saw that tennis ball again.
Yeah. Oh, if he calls you cowards, that's it,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. He's a very intimidating human being.
I mean, so obviously, like we talked about, Grogu, Baby Yoda, like was probably, in my opinion, one of the biggest kept secrets in all of cinema. I mean, it was like a huge deal considering the role he had in season 1, 2, 3, and now a future film. Yeah. What was that like, keeping that a secret from, your family, friends, like everyone around you? Like,
it's probably one of the hardest parts of the job.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you know that you're going to be in this show and you're going to be working on Star Wars, the first thing you want to do is tell everybody
Yeah.
But you can't do that. And so you have to sit on that. You have to go film it. Obviously, my wife knows, because I have her help me run my lines and stuff.
Of course, yeah.
But it was. I just didn't expect it to hit as hard as it did.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know it was going to be such a phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Like, what was the question again? Sorry.
Keeping it a secret, like how hard it was.
Keep it a secret. Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah.
It sucks. Yeah. It just sucks how long it takes for things to come out so you can be able to talk about it. So if they gift you with an appearance in the trailer, it's like this, sigh of relief, and you're like, finally, I can tell people
talk a little bit about it.
Season 3 or season 2 or whatever. Yeah.
Now, many fans might not know this, but you were actually in Star Wars before. You were in you did voice act in the Clone Wars as, I might butcher his name, Cadet Amos, if I'm not mistaken. Amos,
yeah.
And you voice, like, what was the difference between voice acting and now actually, being in live action? Not just Star Wars, but just like, in acting in general. What would you say are the biggest differences?
I mean, the biggest differences for me, just in voice work in general, as opposed to like live action, is on live action, you can tell so much story with just your eyes and your physicality. You don't necessarily need to like lean in on the lines, But in voice work, a lot of the heavy lifting is by those lines, and those lines tend to need to be elevated, right, to tell the story. And so often you go into these like these voiceover jobs not knowing what your character looks like, not knowing what the settings look like, and you're kind of at the mercy of, hopefully you have a good voice director, which we did, that kind of describes the environment you're in. But what was weird about the, Clone Wars is like when I got the audition, it was like 15-year-old British kid. He loves to eat. He's chubby. And so, I came up with this voice. I was like, I'm a bit hungry. I want to eat. No, I don't want to go. Come on. It's fine. That's what I was doing. And then when I saw the actual show, I was like, this guy's like well built. He looks like a football player. It confused the crap out of me. I was like, I would have given him a different voice. He could have still liked food.
More stoic, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that must be funny though, because for you, you probably didn't even have to study much about Star Wars, right? For that.
For that one, I didn't know Star Wars at all. They were I remember they wanted a couple Wookiee sounds,
Mm-hmm.
And so can anybody do a Wookiee sound? And I don't know who raised their hand, but Omid, can you do a Wookiee sound? I was like, I'm not quite sure what the sound is. And I mean, I just wasn't as well versed as I am now.
Yeah.
But what was special about that particular voice job, because normally you're just in the booth by yourself, just doing your lines.
Mm-hmm.
That one was 8 people in a room, and it felt like a table read. Yeah, it was all with all the other actors.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, which I only think elevates performance.
Yeah, because you can build off each other and everything.
Absolutely.
I bet for you during COVID, I mean, did you have any voiceover jobs during COVID?
I did. I worked on this show called Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur.
Right.
And I did it from the confines of my closet with my crappy mic. I'm not one of these pro voice, your setup is 10 times better than mine. Yeah. I'm literally and during one of the takes, my blanket that I was using to drown out sound fell on top of me while I was performing for them. But that was my COVID experience, and I'm so glad it's behind us.
Yeah, of course. And
it was not fun.
And the strike as well. I mean, which was recent.
Strike was it's brutal, man. It was pre-strike and post-strike. The landscape of Hollywood is very different.
Yeah,
for a lot of people. Yeah.
No, totally. So going back to just overall about voice acting, you mentioned one thing you mentioned is that you can really interact. You can rely on using your facial expressions more, and rather than what the lines are actually saying.
Yeah.
How hard was it speaking with somebody who's wearing a helmet, Din Djarin, who's?
Oh yeah. It's kind of hard. It is hard because you have to really listen.
Yeah.
I remember when he came in there to, I think it was Latif for that one. They came in there to rescue Grogu from the experiment in the season 1. I remember he busts in there. He's like, and I was like, please don't. I was protecting him. Please. Like, I'm like, okay, whatever you say.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm making fun of myself. But it is muffled and it is hard to hear him. But your job as an actor is to, you can't let that get to you. That's not an obstacle.
So he sounded like the phone call you got at 1 a.m. basically.
It kind of did. I mean, he was a little bit more clear. Yeah.
Right. Now, one of the biggest things, obviously, so that was obviously in season 1, and then season 2, we saw a little bit of your character, but season 3, we got an entire episode that dove into your character. We saw more of your motives, and we're like, by the end of it, I just did a rewatch on it just the other day, and by the end of it, I told myself, I'm like, you really start to feel pity for your character. What was that like, though? Going from season 1 and season 2 to now having a massive role in season 3, having your own dedicated episode. Did you know all that entering in? What was that like for you?
No, I didn't know. The first season, I may have worked 4 days. Second season, I may have worked 3 or 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in season 3, I got this email from my agent saying, "Hey, these are the days for so and so episode." And then he listed 19 days. And I was like, oh, is this the days for the entire episode? And I'm going to be in 1 or 2 of these days. He's like, no, these are your work days. I'm like, these are all work days for one episode? He's like, yeah. And I was like, oh shoot, that is about something big is about to happen. And then I got the script. And again, they took out the parts that I'm not in, the beginning Mando stuff and the end Mando stuff. So I got 35 pages of this script that was, Dr. Pershing and Elia Kane centric. Yeah. And I read it. And as soon as I finished reading it, I ran to the bathroom and had to release. It was just so much so much. It felt so much pressure and nerves and excitement and anxiety all at the same time. But it I was just so excited about it, and I had a conversation with Isaac, who's the director,
Mhm.
and with Katie, and we met over Zoom. This was all while I was shooting Fear the Walking Dead, so I was in
Right.
Austin. And we just kind of talked through the script. And once I realized I was in good hands,
Yeah.
and all that anxiety and that pressure
Yeah.
was released, and it was just I was left with nothing but excitement.
Of course. I mean,
Yeah,
geez, that's so magical though, especially. And like one thing I really loved about that episode was that you actually got to see the dynamic between you and Katie's, character a lot.
yeah,
Except for the end, which
mm,
yeah, but I
yeah.
was going to ask you, you developed a close friendship with her because you guys have gone to tons of conventions together as well, right?
We've gone to a bunch of conventions. But yeah, aside from that, we go we go on hikes, we hang out.
Oh, that's great.
She is one of my dearest friends, and
Yeah.
I'm just grateful. It doesn't always work out that way, where you'll it gets very intimate for a short amount of time, and then
Yeah.
everybody goes their own ways. And so far, that has not been the case. And I
Yeah.
hope that she's part of my life for the rest of my life. Whether we
Yeah.
work together or not.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
So so now that you've been in the Star Wars universe for 4 years now, roughly.
yeah.
You've obviously gone to a lot of conventions in which, I got the chance to meet you last month. Have you ever had any special moments from these conventions? And have you ever, was there anything that really stood out to you when you attended these conventions?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I just want to say I love going to these fan conventions and getting to
Yeah.
meet everybody, and everybody's so wonderful
Yeah.
and sweet and kind. And even if they disagree with the episode itself, right?
Mm.
If even if it's not their jam, they're still kind about, like, performance wise and this and
Yeah.
that. And that being said, and it's because of the role I, I played on American Gods.
Hmm.
I played a gay Muslim character. Uh, I I've come across, especially these conventions. Like, I remember at my first one, Dragon Con,
Hmm.
uh, during COVID. I remember that people were coming to my line and, like, going away, and I was doing my thing, and then I see this girl who's, like, just at the back, like, standing against the wall, like, not coming forward, and just looks like is in tears.
Oh.
And I was like, hey, like, after my line kind of died down, I was like, hey, are you okay? Like, she's like, she's like, I can't believe, like, I'm so excited to meet you, and I don't,
Oh.
I'm like, her body wasn't responding to that moment.
Yeah.
Like, it was so overwhelming for her.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like, oh, no, no, I'm just a human being just like you are. And I gave her a big hug, and we
Oh.
hugged for a little bit. And just when you realize how you can move people and you can touch people's life and affect people with certain performances.
Yeah.
And listen, I'll be honest with you, I act for very selfish reasons. I act because I love to act.
Yeah.
Love to look at the world through different lenses. I think it's fun as all hell. Like, the affecting people is a very secondary thing for me,
Yeah.
but it's the best part of it. It is, but it's not something like, I'm just being honest. Like, when I go into a job, I don't think about how I'm going to affect people. I just think, like, how I'm going to do a good job on this performance. So it's such a treat when the work that you love to do
Yeah.
affects people in such a way that it's just emotionally moving. Like, and it's happened more than once. I
Yeah.
remember one girl had Dr. Pershing as her wallpaper on her phone. My own wife doesn't even have that. Like, like, how
Aw.
cool is that? I don't know. I think it's super cool.
Was acting always something you wanted to do growing up? Was that always your main passion? You did mention soccer.
Soccer was the thing I wanted to do. I
Yeah.
wanted to be a professional soccer player. I think before I fully realized what it entails to be, you should know by 14 or not whether you're going
Yeah.
to be a professional soccer player.
Yeah.
But I broke my leg playing soccer,
Oh, did
and
you?
in high school, yeah, and that's why I had to take, like, a drama class
Mm-hmm.
uh, instead of sports, and so that's how I found acting, was because I broke my leg in soccer.
Things
So
happen for a reason.
yeah, but even when I took I was an advertising major in college, but
Mm-hmm.
I took acting classes, and I had a double major in theater. Never once did I think I was going to actually become a professional actor. It was just I was chasing this dream. I never thought I would catch it.
But here you are now. So it's like,
Here I am now.
and
Yeah,
you've been
20
doing.
years later.
I was gonna say, yeah, you've been in acting, if I'm not mistaken, since 2005, roughly
2004
2004.
was my first job. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
incredible.
So it's been
So
officially 20 years. Yeah.
yeah. So obviously, like now that the strike's over, Mandalorian season 3 is over, your character, it left on a big cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can only say so much. What can we expect now for the future of not only Dr. Pershing, if there is
Hmm.
one,
Yeah.
but what about the future of your acting career? Do you have any upcoming projects or anything fun coming up?
Um. Well, I'll be first. I'll approach like I mean, I'll answer the man like as far as Star Wars goes and the
Yeah.
Mandalorian goes. I don't have any information.
Yeah.
They're not very giving when it comes to like letting you know whether you're going to be coming back or not.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there's a bigger likelihood I would come back for another season of Mandalorian
Yeah.
than there is me being in the movie.
The movie. Yeah.
I think for you to be able to continue telling the Dr. Pershing story would require some time and space. I don't know if they have that in the movie, right? So for me personally, I'm just grateful for what I had and I move on. And should they call me, I will come running,
Yeah.
back
Of
to
course.
set. But a- but to answer your other question, yeah, I was just recently on the latest season of The Boys.
You were.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people picked up on the fact that I was again working for Giancarlo Esposito, as a morally gray scientist who does experiments on cute little furry things. But at least this Dr. Shaw had a little bit more fight in him. So yeah, so that was a great experience working on The Boys. But aside from that, I don't know. I'm a free agent, and you kind of looking for the next gig. So
Of
we'll
course.
see.
Yeah.
We'll see where life takes me.
Oh, of course. So now I got just a little bit of spicy questions for you. This is a little bit hot topic ones.
Okay.
Who is your favorite character in Star Wars and why?
Yeah. Easily Anakin. Because it's the most fleshed out character in the entirety of the universe.
Yep.
Because I saw these movies like back to back to back to back,
Mm-hmm.
and you see him in the prequels as a kid. Well, I saw it in the chronological order that it came out.
So you watched
Like
4,
so,
5,
I
6
start
first.
I start
Right.
4, 5, 6,
Right.
and I remember really rooting for Darth Vader to have a soft side.
Yeah.
Like I was like, come on, you can't. He's your son. You can't do this. You
Yeah.
can't be this cruel.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he takes off his helmet and he shows a glimmer of who we come to find that he was in the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just love how, because so many times these characters pop out and pop up in and out of these movies, and you don't get to know them in their entirety. And I felt like Anakin, I knew Anakin. You grew up and you loved him as a kid, and then he turned bad, and then you're still rooting for him to find his inner like good side. And it was just, I don't know. So for me, that's the character that sticks out for me.
I think one of the coolest things, and I'm sure like you can relate to this now being a part of the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
When you look at Mando, when you look at Din Djarin, right? Obviously, he's not, you talk about his voice and all that stuff, but he's not really speaking a whole lot. He is kind of quiet. A lot of his facial expressions are through his, his head movement. And, when he's emotional, he'll just, tilt his head a little bit. And I feel like with Vader, Anakin, episode 4 and 5, there's no churning him. He's fully corrupted. He's evil.
Right.
But then episode 6, you start seeing, when he holds Luke's lightsaber, you see him tilt his head a little bit. You see these soft sides, and I think
glimmer
that's
of hope. Yeah,
exactly. And so by the end, when the mask is fully off, it's like, like his family, his son is the one who truly saved him. It is really beautiful though. It's story of Star Wars. So that's your favorite character. What about your favorite movie?
I think it was like, I love the OG stuff.
Yeah.
But I think like as a standalone movie, Rogue One was my favorite.
Rogue One. Wow.
Yeah. I remember watching it and I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
that one hit different. It was its own self-contained thing, and I loved it, and I loved the performances in it, and the cinematography and the look of it.
Yeah.
That, and then I also loved Revenge of the Sith, like the scene on Mustafar between Obi-Wan and Anakin when he's like, "I loved you," and just crushed me.
Well, you actually had a scene in the Opera House.
Yeah.
Like that
It was
was so
more of a
cool.
warehouse, but yeah, it's an opera house after post was done. Yeah.
When I saw it on screen, I was just like, like they're actually bringing this back. Like we're in 2020, 2023 it was. I'm like, we're seeing Coruscant, like the opera house. I thought that was so cool. What like did you know that was going to be like the opera house scene, that same one that was in Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah, so I don't know if you know this. They for every episode they do an entire previs. Like it looks like almost like the animated, like a like a very basic animated version of Mandalorian.
Right.
So they
Yeah.
have all their shots, all their the settings, and so like I got to see this previs. So like
Yeah.
I knew in my head what it was going to look like.
Yeah.
But this opera house wasn't on the volume, so I couldn't see anything. I
Mhm.
was on just like a little elevated platform with a blue screen behind me and
Yeah.
like three extras that they kept moving around. And so I had to give this speech to three people like at 20 times, and I had to keep turning around to do it because they
Yeah.
wanted to get every side of it. Um, but that being said, like I did it 20 times and I maybe messed up once because I knew it so well. Um, and it was just, yeah, I knew the significance of the opera house.
Yeah.
And I was so curious how it all was going to come together, and I couldn't have been more happy with it.
Yeah.
There's nothing like being a giant hologram on screen. That's pretty awesome.
I have to laugh when you say like, oh, yeah, I said it in front of 3 people, and then you look at the episode and it's like, it's just like a few million, 100,000 people,
Yeah, there was
300,000
three
people.
people there. Like if you were to focus on those
Yeah.
three people, but in my mind, when I was giving the speech, I had the thousands of people
Mhm.
all around me.
And then you're
Yeah,
there like, oh, that's where Palpatine's. Oh, Darth Plagueis the Wise. It was up there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Would you say like, because you mentioned like you only messed up, one time. You only had to re-record it one time. Was like, would you say acting in Star Wars has been different than anything you've experienced before? Because it's obviously like, it's science fiction. What would
Yeah.
separate Star Wars?
It's funny. Like I think it is a little bit different.
Yeah.
I think the language is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
There's less like slang, and there's less like, like especially when you're playing an imperial officer, they're very like they tend to be black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember like um during the scene where I get my mind flayed,
Yeah.
I was I've played in much more grittier R-rated things. I've played terrorists who have been tortured, and so my go-to is knowing how to really authentically look like you're being tortured.
Yeah.
And so one thing I was trying to figure out was, because it's Star Wars, it's still like it's a family show at the end of the day,
Yeah.
and we want you have to hold back about going full dark,
Yeah.
like. And I remember Dean was the cinematographer. He's done like Jurassic Park, Back to the Future.
Yeah.
I think it's Kundi or Kudney. I forget. I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but he told me the story of like, that character in Jurassic Park that got eaten by the raptors, the guy with the glasses,
Yeah.
and he had that scream he had to do.
Yeah. That was
So yeah, so Dean was telling me like, and Steven Spielberg was like, after the first rehearsal was like, hey man, I need you. That was an R-rated scream. I need you to give me a PG-rated scream. So
wow.
and so that kind of applied to like that scene. Like,
Yeah.
so I did have to hold back. Like
Huh.
you're uncomfortable, and you did have to scream, but almost in a PG kind of way.
Yeah.
Where it's not. So that's different. Yeah, different than what I'm used to. Like different than The Boys. Like.
100%.
So
I mean, that's what something George Lucas always spoke about. This is at the end of the day, it is designed for kids. It is for families.
it is, yeah. But I don't think you can. I think that can also be a trap for some people. Like, oh, I'm on Star Wars. Better act like I'm on Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like, I think you got to be cognizant of the fact of what you're working in, but you can't fall into that trap.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
So with your acting, did you spend a lot of time with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni?
I mean a lot. Not. I mean, yes and no. Yeah,
Right.
they were always there. John was there every morning.
Oh,
I think by the time season 3 came around, Dave
Yeah.
was working on Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And so he would pop in and out.
Right.
But John was there every morning, making sure we understood the scene.
Yeah.
Technically, the directors understood the scene, the crew understood the scene. So yeah, I got to spend a little bit of time with them, but like I wouldn't say we're like we're uber close or anything like that. But for me, Jon Favreau was one of my favorite, as a fan, one of my favorite artists, storytellers, actors.
Yeah.
like Swingers to me was like my Bible of like coming to Hollywood, you know?
Yeah. So I can only
So
imagine getting that phone call from him personally saying,
yeah,
yeah,
it wasn't the Star Wars part that excited me necessarily. It
it was
was
just,
Jon Favreau.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That's absolutely incredible. No, that's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. So Rogue One and Anakin. No, I love that. That's absolutely amazing. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that's really, I mean, if one thing I really want to say, like, you know, before we wrap up, is there anything you want to share with Star Wars fans that are watching this right now?
I mean, listen, I just have this overall sense of gratitude for everything Star Wars, and Star Wars wouldn't be Star Wars without the fans.
Yeah.
There's nothing more beautiful than seeing, especially these conventions, where Star Wars is being passed down from generation to generation. You have the grandpa or the grandmother and the grandson and the father, you know, and they all are Star Wars fans. And to see it get passed down,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. And I know online things can seem pretty rough at times. Overall, from my experience, like in real life, there's nothing but beauty and support, and it's a great community from what I have experienced. Now, granted, I know I'm an actor, and people smile when I show up and stuff like that. So, um, I'm just very grateful for it, and thank you for letting me entertain you guys as best I could.
Well, thank you for coming on and thank you for chatting with us. It means so much
Yeah.
to all of us, and may the force be with you.
Cheers, may the force be with you.
Thank you so much.
All right, my pleasure.